The White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has claimed that India does not need Russian oil, pointing out that before the Ukraine invasion in February 2022, New Delhi imported less than 1% of its oil from Moscow, whereas now it imports around 35 to 40%. Trump announced 25% tariffs on Indian goods in July, even as there were hopes of an interim India-US trade deal that would have otherwise helped avoid elevated tariffs. A few days later, he imposed another 25%, citing India's continued imports of Russian oil. It is to take effect on 27th of August, bringing the total tariff on Indian products to 50%. Now, talking about the tariffs, Navarro argued India was what he called higher Maharaja tariffs, arguing that they contributed to massive U.S. trade deficit that hurts American workers and businesses. He further claimed that India uses the money they get by selling things to Americans to buy Russian oil.
What is the net impact on the Americans because of our trade with India? Well, let's think about it. They have higher tariffs. There are Maharaja tariffs, higher non-tariff barriers. We run a massive trade deficit with them, so that hurts American workers, hurts American businesses. Then they use the money that they get from us when they sell us stuff to buy Russian oil, which then is processed by refiners, and they make a bunch of money there. But then the Russians use the money.
Well, he, however, mixed his criticism with praise for India's leadership, adding that the road to peace in Ukraine runs through New Delhi. Now, Navarro's comments come as External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar responded to criticism of India by American officials for its energy ties with Russia and said that the U.S. itself had asked India to help stabilize global energy markets by buying Russian oil. Jaishankar called out the U.S. logic to impose tariffs on India despite China being the biggest purchaser of Russian oil and the EU being the biggest purchaser of LNG.
That is Bharat.
We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian oil. That is China. We are not the biggest purchasers of Russian LNG. I'm not sure, but I think that is the European Union. We are a country where actually the Americans said for the last few years that we should do everything to stabilize the world energy markets, including buying oil from Russia.
Well, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Ambassador Anil Trigunath. Now, he's a former Indian diplomat and distinguished fellow at WIF. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Now, Navarro has termed the tariffs as higher Maharaja tariffs, and these comments come at a very interesting time. It comes after Indian and Russian foreign ministers met just yesterday. Chinese foreign minister made a visit to India as well. First of all, how do you analyze his comments and the timing?
Well, as you know, that this is a typical passing the buck strategy that the United States uses. And as far as Mr. Navarro is concerned, frankly, I feel very sorry for President Trump. If he has advisors who are like this, there's a story that the boss says, oh, it's already getting late, getting night. And the advisors around, so to say, will tell him, oh, yes, sir, we can also see the stars. Now, this is a kind of a strategy rather than giving him the facts. As you just showed Dr. Jaishankar talking about it, India is not the largest. Secondly, we are one of the largest importers of oil and gas, and we are dependent on it for our own growth, for our own development. And therefore, we have to get it from wherever it is possible. From United States also, our import of the crude has increased by 120% in recent months. So we are buying from wherever it is possible. Secondly, as has been mentioned earlier, that these tariffs have been totally irrational, unjustified, based on no facts whatsoever. China imports much more than India does. United States itself is trading with Russia. And recently during the meeting between President Putin and President Trump in Alaska, The ExxonMobil and other companies are looking to eye opportunities in Russia. And they even put off those sanctions on Russia for that interim period, and even now they're continuing to talk to them. So they're not doing anything against any of the countries. But India somehow seems to fuel this war, which we have been trying to stop from day one and have been telling even Russians as well as the Ukrainians to come to dialogue and diplomacy. India has been actually praised for stabilizing approach, even for the oil market. So I think that this is something that we really cannot put any reason to it, and history and geography are not the strongest point of Americans.
All right, of course, absolutely. Now, of course, right after he made the statement, he kind of toned it down, his comments, saying that road to peace is through New Delhi. How do you analyze that? And how do you mentioned how Trump administration somehow, and Trump is known for using tariffs as a weapon. How do you analyze these comments and his toning down, saying that peace is through New Delhi?
Well, Prime Minister Modi, as you know, that before President Putin went to Alaska, he spoke to Prime Minister Modi. After coming back, he briefed him about this. Prime Minister Modi is also will be meeting the Chinese president. Prime Minister Modi also spoke to Ukrainian president. And he has been talking to, yesterday he spoke to French President Macron also. So India has been engaged internationally and has been trying to, bring about peace and a little bit of a sense in everybody. But in the bargain, India is being hit with tariffs by President Trump instead of thinking that this is the strongest partner that they have in the region. They are trying to just, dissuade India from doing the right thing. That is not going to happen, that is for sure. But I think that putting tariffs, arbitrary sanctions is the prerogative. Let them use it, and eventually it's the American people who will realize that by putting these kind of tariffs, this is going to impact them much more adversely than it will do to India or any other country. But as Dr. Jaishankar here also said, that we need friends who are reliable and dependable, but we cannot depend on A country or B country for our own growth. So self-reliance, Atmanirbhar, all those initiatives and diversifying our partnerships are the way forward that India is looking at.
And I was also wondering that if after this whole has come out, do you think is there a possibility of somehow a deal being made between U.S. and India, considering that just a few hours before U.S. and Europe, they made a deal, Japan has made a deal. Do you think that's a possibility between India and U.S. as well?
Well, this has been a very big possibility from the very beginning. We are one of the first to have offered to have a bilateral trade agreement with them, mini trade deal or full trade deal, whatever it is. Discussions were going on. And apparently on July 6th, there was a final thing that has been submitted to President Trump. He didn't like it. So he wanted it to be sent back for further negotiations. Now the negotiations were undergoing while he imposed these 25% tariffs, then 25% additional tariffs up to 27th, which will become implemented. And the meeting between the two sides has been called off for some reason. Now, if that does not happen, then how do you proceed further? So we'll have to continue to really, cover ourselves. That's the most important thing. And we'll continue to diversify. That's the lesson India has learned, I guess. And that's how we are going to. So there is really no dependability in certain things as far as the United States or any major power are concerned.
All right. Well, of course, we'll have to leave it at that. But thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador, and giving your perspective.